We met a really long time ago in India,
Nice.
like Caesar Turull's
Oh,
meeting.
yeah, I remember. You have brown curly hair.
Curly, now it's very short, but yes, that's what I did have, yes.
Yeah, nice, I remember.
I feel so nervous for some reason. Um,
Well, in the imagination, there is apparently lots of people watching, but it's in imagination. And then there's also speaking to someone new, which is me, and then trusting me. So that's also can create
but I think
nervousness.
it's also just that I've been like in this world and thinking about this stuff for so long and trying to encapsulate a question from right now,
Yeah.
Like this is the chance to ask a question at this point, and so there's a certain like, how do I encapsulate that?
Yeah.
At times now I feel like I have a question of, in a way, like this has been seen so many times, and now is it a habit of thinking I still need to look for something when it's already been seen? But it's almost like if there's still suffering, there's a feeling like it has not been seen, or a thought that it has not been seen. And when that just might be biological life, like that just might be a human thing, like that I'm having feelings, I'm having thoughts, I'm having these things that are very natural to this experience. And that doesn't mean that it hasn't been seen, but it seems to me that like when it really has been seen and actually experienced deeply, that suffering wouldn't feel the same anymore.
Yeah. And fortunately and unfortunately, dependent on the way you see it, that is not true. So that is only an idea of the mind. And then the question for you is this idea helpful or unhelpful for you? So is it a useful thought for you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's useful. That's sort of why the question is just this a habitual thought, that like there might just be more suffering with this particular body and mind, like that just might be part of the character.
Yeah, and your definition of suffering might not be the same as my definition of suffering. Like like my definition of suffering is the attachment to the person and then the seeking, but it's not the end of, like, the character is always going to want to move towards pleasure because that's the way we're biologically set up. So there's nothing wrong with that. And even my conceptual ideas that I'm saying about the end of suffering are only ideas, and they don't really matter, and they're not something to mark yourself by. What's important is it's happening. So even if the character is suffering or not suffering, there is still the experiencing of that, and that is the freedom. The character does as it does, pain, pleasure, suffering, not suffering, and all of that is our labeling of it. And is it helpful or unhelpful? It's helpful to label pain and to be able to create stories to help release it and to help navigate our surrounding. But then to keep retelling it, why are we retelling it? Like you say, is it a habit? Is it condition? It could be also something you're genetically imprinted with from your parents or your grandparents. So what's always important is that it's happening. So in this moment, there is perception happening, which is nowhere and everywhere. And then there's all the thoughts that come with that, but they aren't reality. They are simply abstracts of a mind. And it doesn't really matter to categorize them as free or not free, because the freedom is beyond that. So more than likely it's habit of the mind. Well, in a way you could say even more than likely it is a habit of the mind to do that.
Like there's this thought, are thoughts just like a sneeze? Are they just like nothing to really do anything with. They're just sort of like passing by.
Yeah. And then you get more intense thoughts that get stuck. So say if you got a shock, or if someone was rude to you, you know, like different, and then there's an emotion that comes with it, and you can do emotional release techniques to help that pass. There's lots of different ones. When you get shocked or you get upset, sometimes the thoughts are repeating themselves, you know, like trying to work out what's happened or what's wrong. But they're never really truth. They have perspective on them. So say if someone falls over in front of you, like that's how we label it. They fell over, and that helps. Okay, they fell over, they need help. So our thoughts are here to help us. That person was rude to me when I said this, so in future I won't say this to them again. But they're not a truth, and they're not who you are, and they're not who the other person is. They're just a happening. They're like these ethereal wisps. And when they get stuck in the body, then you can do an emotional release technique. But that's not your freedom. Your freedom is always this moment, the perception. And everything is welcome. All thoughts, all ideas, all judgments, all rejections, all suffering, all seeking.
Including getting on the rides of these thoughts?
Yeah, that is included as well, because that's what's happening. It's all a happening in that freedom. It's just when you get involved in the thoughts, then it produces that feeling like suffering because you're getting stuck somewhere. But that is freedom too. It just feels contracted when you do that, but it's happening in the most immense space. But it gives a particular flavor to the experience. But the consciousness is still everywhere in all things. It's never been contracted. It's never hidden. It's always been in everything. It's just that contraction, or that mind is now saying I'm bad and I'm small and I've done wrong, and it's lost in its turmoil. But the consciousness has never been lost. Who you truly are, who's truly listening to me, has never been lost, has never suffered, has never rejected. It's always been crystal clear.
Yeah, it's strange almost sometimes as that is seen more weirdly now, there's more anxiety, which might just have a seed in that idea that there shouldn't be or something. But there's all the data that I take in about, like you mentioned, other people's preferences to not do that thing again that irritated them and then felt bad when they responded to me or whatever. Like, it almost seems like that's weirdly now on overdrive, like to the point that relating to other people has gotten just way too much, because I'm just taking in everything to not step on tripwires and all this stuff that like weirdly was not so prevalent before.
Yeah, that can be a difficulty of becoming more self-aware for some people. So the more they become self-aware, they realize that was in play. It was in play before, but it just wasn't so much in focus. And then as you become more conscious on the human level, become more self-aware, you realize these things are there. And then it's like they can become alarms. So then when you're interacting with someone, it's like you become overly focused on that. And that can be problematic and difficult for certain people. I've really noticed that. And that's to do with self-awareness as you become more aware of what the human's doing. And so, then the recommendation would be to, in that moment, put the awareness in awareness, not in the self-awareness. But I know this from people, certain characters, particular ones that have difficulty with socializing, this can become very exaggerated. So then on the practice level, it'd be put the attention in the awareness and not put too much attention in that. And if you've never explored that with someone, you could also talk through what that is and where that comes from, the over focus on other people. It's like
I think it's just preventing pain. It's preventing lines of people and having them get mad at me ultimately, and not wanting to navigate that or believe that I am doing something wrong. Even if I'm not, I might believe it in the situation and just go on that ride with it. Even though at another level, I don't believe any of it. So at another level, it's just like, almost like, but I'm looking at them and thinking, well, they believe it though, and my like nervous system wise is being affected, regardless if I actually believe what they're saying. It's still like there's an impact here on the body, and that is something I don't like experiencing. So
the seeking then starts, and you can explore that on the human level, because there are certain characters where where they find it harder to interpret people's signals, or they find it harder to understand the perspective of other people, and so therefore it becomes a lot more effort for them, and so there is a lot more pain involved in social interactions. But that's something you can explore with someone else or by yourself. Like you said, you're aware of what happens, and then you're aware of something deeper, and so there would be, from my perspective, of including that, accepting that, acknowledging that, but then also focusing on what is deeper in the experience, because that will go on. And like you say, it might be a very bodily thing, and that might also be, the karma of that body to, struggle more on social interactions and interpretations, and then that overriding the nervous system. It depends on your genetics, it depends on your past, there's so many things that could be. But the most important bit from the non-dual perspective is, like you say, this knowing of what is deeper. Like, what is happening here that is deeper than the pain and pleasure of social interaction?
The thing is, even when I do that in the moment and I'm dropping into that, it doesn't necessarily relieve pain.
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, you're right. Totally. Pain can be there. That's the same for me. So if I'm in a scary situation, the fear is there. And that's what's meant to be there. Like that, it's not that this realization is going to relieve the fear. If there's a scary situation happening, even if the mind's just thinking of a scary situation, that can still have the same effect. Or watching a scary situation on TV, the body experiences fear. And it's not about relieving that fear. There is a knowing of something deeper that's happening, and that's the freedom, but that's what's meant to happen in the body. The body's not meant to always be in bliss and joy and ecstasy. It's part of being human to experience pain. It's part of being a mammal. You see other animals doing it. Like today, Khaleesi was walking past a dog that was really not a threat, but something was threatening to her, and so all her heckles, Khaleesi's my dog, were up. So I could tell that she was in a state of fear, and I couldn't really perceive what she was scared about, but that's what happened. And that's the karma in that moment, is fear. It's really not the end of pain. It's the end of the identification and the judgment and the rejection of it. But pain is pain. Emotional pain is pain. The true freedom is this recognition that what you truly are is not affected by the pain or the pleasure. And then this idea, this judgment that when I get to what Lisa's talking about, it will eradicate these things, it will eradicate social difficulty, is a belief that's appearing and disappearing and has no effect on that which is free. It just creates a sensation in the body. And that's okay for it to create that, but that's what it's doing. It just doesn't have truth.
And it doesn't feel like a detachment to you?
No, it's actually a real embracing in a way. It's like the detachment is the avoidance of the fear. It's like when you experience fear, it's like really experiencing fear, not telling yourself a story or trying to avoid the fear or trying to conceptualize it to get rid of the fear. It's like there is full-fledged fear. It's like really feeling the fear. It's not pushing the fear away. It's not rejecting the fear, it's not trying to hide from the fear, it's really letting in that pain and that fear without any rejection. In a way, you could say in that moment, the whole world becomes fear. There's not somebody that's owning or holding that fear. It's like everything is fear. It's like an intensity. So it's really, it sounds like detachment in a way, but it's really the opposite. Telling yourself a story and avoiding the fear is a detachment. It's like a real embracing of the experience.
Almost from that place, it's just like, there's fear here. Like, is that sort of what you're saying?
There is fear here. And there can be a story in the sense of like, there is something that's scary out there that I need to move away from. But, like there's a lion running towards me, so there can be some form of conceptualization happening. But it's like, it's not very involved in conceptualization. It's like, that is what's happening. And if conceptualization happens and lots of thinking, then that's what's happening as well. This really isn't an escape of the human, it's an embracing of the human. Because the human is what's appearing. The fear is what's appearing, just like the embracing of the room. The lie is that is who you are. That is not who you are. Who you are is the perception of it all, which is a difference from being the person that is afraid. Like, what's perceiving now is not that person in fear. That is something that's appearing in perception. It's not the person that does or doesn't like socialization. That person that does or doesn't like it can't experience, it's being experienced.
I think there's just really nothing to do. I think there's been a lot of doing. Like, I don't think it's almost like noble to not do anything, even though there's actually nothing to do. Or that it's not right, like, to just, because of just that human level. Like, even when I see this, it's still like, yes, and I'm still here as a human too. So there's still stuff to deal with and navigate, and that's just part of being alive. So I can feel like what I really am is none of that stuff.
Yeah.
And yet still here I am navigating in a way. So
the doing happens. Always has to, in the apparent human world, always has to be dealing with things. Apparently, like, we have to deal with our stuff, we have to deal with our relationships. But that's not the person, that's not the one experiencing, that is an experience, and that's the fundamental difference. Like, when the doer is the experiencer, this is what creates, it's like, I am experiencing this and my life is really real and this is really serious.
I know there's some seed here that's, like, there's something fishy, but with this thing that you're saying, there's been so often a feeling like, I don't believe on any of the things, but others do. Like, others believe that, and so that's why I have to keep this stuff in order or whatever. Like, I don't really think that I'm any of these things. I don't feel like any of these things. I don't identify with these things.
Yeah.
But I must identify, like, I must feel like I have to do it a certain amount in order to kind of just like
pacify others.
Yeah, and just be like somewhat comfortable in life. Like, I kind of have to play in this game.
Totally. Yeah, totally. There needs to be a playing in this game. Otherwise, you'll end up on the streets begging for food. So there needs to be a playing in this game with others. And there needs to be an apparent keeping up with appearances. But the others are a projection of your imagination. But in order to play the game, just like if you're playing a board game, you have to roll the dice or take the cards. If you don't do that, then, more than likely your life, when I say your life, I mean your possessions and all your things will begin to be lost. But the others are a projection of their imagination. They don't really exist. But there's these rules that apparently exist. Like, if you don't pay your rent, then you'll have nowhere to live. If you don't eat food, then you will starve. If you don't, if you aren't cooperative with others, then you will be alone. But there isn't actually people there that you're interacting with. So the person that collects your rent doesn't actually exist. They just exist as habits and conditions. Who they truly are is consciousness. But in the world of apparent objects, there is conditions. You do have to pay the rent, you do have to brush the hairs, you do have to interact, you do have to earn money, you do have to feed the body, otherwise all of that will begin to disintegrate. But it's who are they and who they truly are. So when you look in your landlord's eyes, who he truly is or who she truly is consciousness. Not the character that's demanding money or angry or happy with you. And that's deeply relaxing. So their judgments are simply judgments appearing and disappearing, but who's looking at you doesn't judge you, who's hearing you doesn't judge you, who's experiencing you doesn't judge you, but their body has seeming judgments and conditions arising and disappearing. But
it almost feels like they would have to know that. I know that's not true, but that's how it feels right now. Like they would have to know that
to make your life
easier.
Have to
kind of be in on that.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, like
otherwise it feels like a real weight, because it feels like there's a real belief of what we are and what I should be to them and all these roles and
but where are they now? So that might appear in the moment, this role that has to be acted out, but the rest of the time when you feel the heaviness of them, that's in your imagination. So in the moment of it, there might be a weight to having to be a certain way. But when they're not there, then it's totally in your imagination. So you're holding up this idea of what you have to be to them or how you have to be. And you're holding it in your body. I know, like it's like you're holding this relationship. And that's okay to hold this relationship, but it's not true. It doesn't exist. There is nobody that you're in relationship right now with. There is these bodies speaking, but there's really nobody you're in relationship with. But your body might be performing for mine, and mine might be performing for you in order to get on or to have a consistent conversation. But there's not actually two people speaking. There is simply speaking happening in perception. There's complete intimacy with that. There isn't two people speaking now.
But there are seemingly two bodies.
Yeah, seemingly. I don't know if there is here, but there might be there. I mean, I can't even see your body. There is sound coming out of the speaker. I can see a name flash on every time you speak. And a hand up. But really,
that's my yellow hand.
Yeah, that is you. Like really, there's like sound appearing in perception. Nice, but maybe that's enough now. I can see I've been live for 2 hours. I really enjoyed speaking with you. I always love hearing from you and have strong, beautiful memories of our time in Tiruvannamalai watching Caesar.
Yeah. Thanks, Lisa.
Yeah, pleasure. Yeah, thank you. Nice.